Welcome to the DOC, Dose of Courage podcast, where courage crusaders from across the globe come to get what they need to become bolder, more confident, and courageous enough to be who God has called them to be, do what God has called them to do, and take possession of everything God said they could have. I'm your host, Courage Molina, Chief Courage Crusader. Let's go. Today's episode is brought to you by me, the Courage Mastermind. I truly believe many of us have the tools to build the life of our dreams, but we lack the confidence to actually follow through. What would you do with bolder faith? Faith that compelled you to take action on the things you've been praying for. How would your life change if you were more confident, so confident that you no longer allowed doubts about yourself or fear of making mistakes to keep you from answering the call on your life? How would you impact the world for the kingdom if you were courageous enough to be who God has called you to be, do what God has called you to do, and take possession of everything He said you could have? If you're ready to do the work and find out, schedule a call with me today. Go to the website couragemolina.org. What's up, y'all? So if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Welcome, friends. Go ahead and subscribe, binge listen to all the episodes that you missed, and be sure to write a 5-star rated review, because I already know you're going to love it. That's why I can give you so much instructions. If you've been rocking with me for a minute, I appreciate you. Thank you for continuing to share. Thank you for sharing it on your social media, tagging me, emailing. I love it when you guys leave comments. I love it when you engage. The podcast is great, but my favorite thing is engagement. So I love it when you guys talk to me and let me know how you are feeling about the episodes. If you are in the Dose of Courage community and you are a for real courage crusader, then be sure to share your ahas in the Facebook group, #Dose of Courage. Okay, thank you so much. Now, I always start the episode off with now listen, but that's just what I'm about to say. Now listen. I wonder, have you ever tried to convince somebody of something like that? Ugh, that Starbucks is the best. I don't even bother trying to convince people. I ask them if they've had it. If they say they have and they don't think it's the best coffee, then I'm just like, okay, I just let it go. I don't even bother trying to convince them. I think it's different from persuading because, I think persuading works because a person is on the fence or they're uninformed about something, and you can give them additional information or maybe a fresh perspective, which can sometimes help them to decide or help to persuade them one way or another. But with convincing, that's a little different, because for me, I think that convincing implies they already have a position, and so they're not really open to or able to consider another option. When I lived in the projects back in the day, there were these twin boys. They were little boys. They were probably, I don't know, probably like 4 or 5 or something. Maybe they were a little older than that. And their names are Eon and Keon. And so they would visit their grandma who lived next door to me, and they were related to my best friend. And so when they were, I don't know, they was probably like kindergarten or first grade, I really, truly enjoyed trying to convince them they were actually the other twin, right? So I would get them to try and prove to me they were right and I was wrong. And it was funny because they were very funny kids, and they were very animated. I would be like, so if I was talking to Eon, I would say, "Which one are you?" And he would say, "I'm Eon." And I would be like, "Are you sure?" because you look like Keon. And he would say, yeah, because we twins. I'd be like, yeah, but what if you wrong? What if you Keon and your brother is really Eon? And he would be like, no, that's not it. I'm Eon. And I'm like, how you know though? Because you look the same. Y'all sound the same. Maybe you really Keon. Maybe you woke up this morning and now you're Keon. And he would be like, no, I know who I am. I'm my own self. I'm my own man, which is funny because he was only like 5. But I would kind of keep that going. And it's a really silly thing, right? And they could eventually see that it was hopeless trying to convince me that I was wrong. They would be like, man, they would just shake their heads, and giggle and walk away. And their mom used to be like, why you bother my kids? Like, it's just a good time, that's all. And as crazy as that sounds, I know y'all are like, she is crazy. First of all, kids are so funny. They really, there's so much we can learn from them because at some point they realize, like, ain't no convincing her. I ain't got time for this. I know which twin I am. I'm done, right? And they would just like essentially be walking away. As crazy as that sounds, I even try to do that now in different areas of my life. And you probably do too. When I was a young wife, I've been married for 19 years now, but when I was a young wife, I wanted to convince, and I mean convince, I wanted to convince my husband I was a good wife and he was lucky to have me. In the beginning, I didn't have to, right? Because he could see that. But there's certainly been time during our marriage or throughout our marriage where it felt like he didn't see it and there was nothing I could do to convince him otherwise. I used to teach. Oh, Lord. I used to teach, and I loved teaching for the most part, like loved it. But I was at a Christian school, and I remember I tried to convince this parent that I was a good person. Like, I'm a good human being. Yes, I was strict, but I wasn't like mean spirited. I'm not bullying your third grader. Like, come on. And no matter what I said or what I did, I just couldn't get her to see me for who I really was. She was like, oh, you take joy in them struggling. I'm like, what? What are you like? What are you saying? Stop it, right? I couldn't convince her. But listen, I could go on and on about the times in my life where I have tried to convince somebody. And what it is, it's like we're really wasting our time because we are trying to convince people that we are worthy, that we are talented, that we are called, that we're special, that we're valued. And if you are like a kid or something, then maybe you just don't understand how convincing works. Like, just forget about it. It's just, as an adult, we have to stop trying to do that, especially in this entrepreneurial space. I know for me, and I know for many others, like, I see these complaints, and I myself have even made some of them, but you see these complaints all the time. Like, you don't get any family support, or there's not enough support from your spouse, or, your friends can't really see what you're trying to do now. And at the end of the day, what we have to realize is that it's not our job to convince people of anything. That's not your job. Your job is not to convince people of anything. We want to convince them because we believe we make what they say or don't say, what they do or what they don't do in our lives, we make that mean something. So people aren't even necessarily saying, I mean, some of you might experience, but for the most part, people are not saying to you, oh, you're not talented. No, I don't think you're gifted. No one's said to me, I'm trying to think. I don't think so. Not to my face anyway. No one has said to me that I wasn't called to ministry. Nobody said to me that God didn't pick me, that he couldn't pick me, that because of my background, I shouldn't be in ministry. Because of my experience, I shouldn't. Nobody's ever said that to me. Nobody told me I shouldn't write a book, or I couldn't write a book, or they didn't think I could hack it. Nobody said that to me ever. But based on how people have treated me, the way people have asked or not asked about what I'm doing, that in my mind has meant that they are not supporting me. And the reason they're not supporting me is because they don't believe that I have what it takes, or they don't believe in me. It's a conversation my husband and I have had, and he's always like looking at me like I'm crazy. He's always looking at me like I'm crazy. It's like, wait, what? Is that what you think? You think I don't believe in you? I'm like, just saying. I'm like, I'm not saying, I'm like, I don't know. I'm saying I don't think you believe in necessarily that I'm going to be, do, or have the things that I'm believing for. And he's always saying that that's not true. And so I started to think about that some. This is the thing, is that we want to convince them because we're kind of struggling with it ourselves. Because at the end of the day, like, Jesus wasn't trying to convince people that he was the Messiah. He was just doing his thing, right? But yet and still, there were people that couldn't see that he was the Messiah. And it's like people can be blind to your vision. People can be blind to, sometimes people are blind to your greatness because they also don't see the vision. And in order for someone who is blind to see anything, they can't be convinced, they have to be healed. There has to be some growth there. There has to be some change in who they are. It's not going to be something that you can talk them into. You can't talk the blind into seeing, right? You cannot convince them to see your greatness any more than you can convince the legally, physically blind into seeing the road or the sun or the stars. It doesn't matter how bright the sun shines. If a person is blind, they can't see it. You can't convince them into being able to see. They have to be made whole. There has to be some healing, right? The same is true for the mind. It doesn't work that way. When it comes to being able to see someone's vision or somebody's worth or somebody's value, that somebody's talented or gifted, in order for somebody to be able to see that in you, they have to be able to see. And sometimes people can't see because they're blind. They're blind to their own greatness. If you pay attention, excuse me, if you pay attention to the people that you feel like are blind, or people you want to convince, or people you want to show how great you are, if you pay attention to that, you'll be able to see that they are blinded to their own greatness. They can't see how great they are. And that's at the end of the day, and I don't care what they're doing, I don't care what level they are achieving at, when people can't see the greatness in you and you are great, they're blind to it. You know, I had somebody, I had a close relative tell me when I was in high school, because I was a teen parent, basically tell me I wasn't going to be anything, I wasn't going to do anything, I wasn't going to graduate. And I didn't waste any time trying to convince him. I just graduated. That's it. I didn't spend time trying to convince him that I was going to school every day. And he says to this day, he didn't even know I had graduated from high school until I graduated from college. I'm like, so you thought I dropped out? He's like, yeah, I thought you dropped out. So he even saw something or believed something that wasn't even true. I hadn't dropped out. I was still going to school. I graduated on time, right? But the real problem is there's a root lie that is revealed when somebody is making us feel this way, right? There's a root for us that is being irritated when we feel the urge to convince somebody. Deep down on some level, we've fallen for the lie, right? So when I feel like I have to convince you of something, it's because there's a small part of me that also believes the lie. There's a part of me that doesn't believe that I'm a great wife. There's a part of me that doesn't believe that I'm worthy, or that I'm called to be, a leader in ministry, or that I'm called to lead a ministry. There's a part of me that doubts my gifts. There's a part of you that feels less than, unworthy, unqualified. There's a part of you that believes that lie. And so then as a result of that, you want to convince other people, right? I'm trying to prove it to you because I'm not trying to prove anything that I don't struggle with, right? So I'm not trying to prove to you I'm a woman. I'm not trying to prove to you I'm Black. I don't care what you think. I'm just going to show up Black, and that's going to be that. And either you can see that I am or you can't see it, and that's cool. I'm not trying to prove to you I'm a woman. You can either see that I am or you cannot, and that's cool, right? I'm not trying to convince you of anything. This is who I am. But when it comes to these areas where sometimes we have doubts and we have this uncertainty, that's the time we try to convince. So I want you to kind of think about that some. What is the root lie that you're believing that's leading you to this place where you're trying to convince somebody of something? Because you cannot convince the blind to see. It's an absolute waste of time. You wouldn't spend any time doing that. If you met someone and they told you they were blind, or you could see that they were blind based on how they moved about in the world, you would not be trying to convince them of anything. You would not be trying to convince them to see, like, oh, but just look. But if you use no, that sounds crazy. You wouldn't even know where to begin. The same is true for your greatness. The same is true for your talent, for your worthiness. Somebody's inability to see value in you does not diminish the value of you. Okay? Somebody's inability to see value in you does not diminish your value. We see this all the time. If you go out to purchase anything, right? Whether you're cheap or you buy luxury items, when somebody goes, let's use cars, for example, I can go on a car lot and say, okay, I want to look at this range. And I get there and I'm driving and it's great and I like it and it seems good. And then I'm like, oh, okay, what does this cost? Like, how much is this? And they can tell me the price and I can say, oh, that's a lot. You tripping, you doing too much. Let me tell you what they're not going to do. They're not going to try and convince me of the value. They're going to tell me about the features. They're going to tell me what makes it good, all of that stuff. They're going to inform me, right, about the car. After that informing is done, and I'm still like, oh, y'all are tripping, they are not going to say, oh, well, since Courage Molina does not value us at this level, and we must not have that value. It must not be truly valued at that much. So we're going to bring our price down, or we're not going to sell these anymore, because no, they are not doing that. They do not care about what you think about a Range Rover. You can think they overpriced status symbols all you want. They don't care. Same thing is true about Starbucks coffee. You ain't got to like it. They're not trying to convince you that they are worthy of your $6.67 for that large coffee. They don't care. This is what it is. They just feel like, oh, okay, well, you don't see the value. This doesn't change how dope we are. It doesn't change how great we are. And the same is true for you. It doesn't change anything. Somebody else's opinion of you doesn't change who you truly are. It doesn't change your skill set. It doesn't change your gifting, your anointing at all. Somebody else's opinion of you sometimes is revealing of who they are. But it's how we respond to that opinion. And every time we respond by trying to convince, and you're trying to convince, because this is what happens. Listen. I stay right now. I'm trying to, and y'all know I'm very transparent on here. I stay trying to convince my husband that I was made for this, that this ministry and my calling and the courses that I teach are gonna, provide a lifestyle for us that we have never seen, right? I stay trying to convince him. And I know that I shouldn't, which is why I'm doing this podcast. So this is probably the last time that I will do it without thinking about the fact that I'm trying to convince him. So what'll happen is every time there's some type of milestone or something happens that is a confirmation for me that I'm on the right track, I tell him about it and I'm waiting for his response. And then he responds the way he responds. And then I'm disappointed. My emotions are completely deflated because I'm like, why doesn't he see that this is whatever? But this is it. I feel that way because one, I've attached the success of what I'm doing, the success of the mastermind, the success of the online school and the podcast. I've kind of also attached that to my value at some level, which I got to undo. Kind of attach that to my value. So if it's successful, then it means that I am gifted and I am talented. It doesn't actually matter in real life, right? If this is successful or not, it doesn't change my talents. There are lots of people who are amazing singers who are not pop stars, who are not music artists. There are lots of people who are amazing musicians that have not been successful in creating a career for themselves. Doesn't take away their talent, right? And so even though I've done that and I shouldn't have done it, I mean, obviously I didn't intentionally do it. That's what we do. I'm attaching my value as a person, my worthiness to the success or to the outcome of what I'm doing. And so when I'm looking for confirmation to remind myself that I don't stink. It's an identity issue. One, the root thing there is that I'm the one struggling. But when I share that and he's like, oh, cool, or like just nodding his head and there's no excitement whatsoever, I immediately start to think, okay, he just does not believe in me no matter what I tell him. He is not going to believe that this is going to work out, yada, yada, yada. When at the end of the day, one, he's not even saying he doesn't think it's going to work out. Two, I've told myself a story about what his response means. Because he responded this way, it means he feels this way about me, this way about it, which is not necessarily true. I've not confirmed that with him. I've not asked him. And honestly, when I have asked him, he's like, no, I do support you. No, I do think that you're talented. No, I do think that you're going to be great. It just takes time. I'm like, yeah, you're just saying that. Right? It's crazy how we could hear what we think we want to hear. And because of how a person responds, we feel like they can't see us. Right? So sometimes it's not so much that they're blind. Sometimes it's that we're blind. We're blind to our own talent, to our own gifting, to our own worthiness. And no one can convince us of otherwise. It doesn't matter how many things you've accomplished, how many awards you have, the accolades, the testimonials, people appreciating you, the number of invites that you get. Like, those things don't matter, right? And the reason they don't matter is because you are blind to your own greatness and you cannot be convinced to see your greatness. You have to be made whole. You have to get into a place where you realize who you are is not attached to what you do. Who you are is not attached to your marital status. Who you are is not attached to the number on the scale or on the account balance. Who you are is not attached to what you've been through, your experience. It's not your resume. You are who God says you are. And there's no convincing you of that. I am not in the business of convincing you. I'm not in the business of trying to convince you that you are a child of the Most High God, that you are holy, that you are called, loved, anointed, talented, gifted, that you have purpose, that you are worthy of love, that wealth is your birthright. I have no time to convince you of that. But when people don't respond in a way that we think they should or that we want them to, and we immediately tell ourselves this story that they don't support you, they don't believe in you, the truth of the matter is they probably do believe in you and they probably do love you and see that you're worthy and see that you're great, but you are the one who are blind to it. Because I'm trying to tell you, the things that you are not blind to as it relates to yourself, just think of that. How many times have you tried to convince somebody of something that you know to be true and that you have no doubts about? Have you ever tried to convince somebody that you're from where you say you're from? My kids are Black and Puerto Rican. I am their mother. I am Black, African American, and their dad is Puerto Rican. And so there were times when they were in middle school and in high school where they were like, people don't believe we're mixed. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, they don't believe us when we say that we're Black and Hispanic. They think we're just Black. And I'm like, well, your last name's Molina. And that's just the first thing I go to. Your last name's Molina. They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, what do y'all say? And they're like, we won't say nothing. We just say, okay. Like, they did not try to convince people that they were Black and Hispanic. They have no doubt who they are. They're not confused. They're not struggling to see themselves as biracial. They ain't struggling with trying to see themselves as biracial. They've been biracial their whole life. It is not new to them. It is nothing to them, right? Like, it is just a fact. That's it. They're not trying to convince. When is the last time you tried to convince somebody of something you know and you can see for yourself? Convince them. I'm not talking about like, oh, in conversation, we talking about who's the best rapper or who's the best, coffee, which is Starbucks, obviously, or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about as it relates to you. When's the last time you tried to convince somebody you live in the city you live in, or you're from where you're from, or you graduated from the high school or the college? When's the last time you tried to convince somebody you had a degree? When's the last time you tried to convince somebody of how tall you were, how much you weighed, what your race was? When is the last time you tried to convince somebody of that? When's the last time you tried to convince somebody you were married or single or divorced? When's the last time you tried to convince somebody that you were a parent or that you weren't a parent? When? You haven't. You know why? Because you feel like if they can't see it, then that's on them. That's why. It doesn't matter what somebody says to you or how somebody treats you. You do not walk away from that thing trying to convince them of the things that you can see in yourself. So you're really the one that is struggling with sight here. You're really the one that's blind to your dopeness, blind to your worthiness, blind to how lovable you are and how much you deserve, right? You're blind to your greatness, your calling, the level at which you've been called, the way in which you've been talented and gifted. You're blind to the vision that God has for you. You're struggling to see it. And we cannot convince the blind. That includes ourselves. The blind must be made whole. I'm going to tell you a place where you can get some healing, not a place where you can be convinced, a place where you can get some healing. Is going to be understanding that the Bible is a place that we go to understand who we are, to get sight, to be healed, right? And I always say we should start at the Bible first. Let that be your first step, that you would take some time in the Word of God to deal with whatever the root cause of what you're missing, right? The root cause of the lie that you believe. Like, what's that root? What's that core lie that you're believing, right? I feel like going to the Word to help you get that. I feel like you should always start there. But honest to goodness, this Courage Mastermind, that is what it's for. It's so that you can get some healing, right? You can get healed in a way that, helps you to identify the core lie that's buried so deep that you've believed for so long. You don't, one, even remember how it got there. You don't even realize that it's there, but it is how you filter everything through. All your experiences are filtered through that core lie. And the Courage Mastermind is designed to help you first start with identity. It's designed to help you first start with discovering what that core lie is, that you believe hook, line, and sinker, that leads you to a place where you are wasting your time trying to convince other people because you need to convince yourself. Because all you're really doing is looking for external affirmation. You're looking for external validation, external confirmation. It's not enough for you to feel it in your spirit. You're looking for something tangible outside to prove to you that God has called you. And I'm not just saying this to you, I'm saying it to me. There's a core lie there. And so that means that there's work to be done, that healing needs to take place. Not that you can be convinced that you're great, no matter how successful. Look at all the successful people that struggle, still with things like identity crisis and the competition, being so competitive and not being kind and struggling with drugs and addiction. I wonder what the root cause of that is. It's not just because they're rich and famous and then it's a party lifestyle. Because there are lots of people who are rich and famous who do not partake in, illegal activities like drug consumption and getting high. Like, there are lots of them. So I wonder, what's the root cause? What's the core lie there? That even though they have all this success, even though they have all these Grammys or Oscars or whatever, they still walk around feeling unworthy, still walking around feeling unloved, uncalled, questioning their gifts and their talents, not sure if it's going to be enough. Right? We're always looking for this external validation, and that requires healing. I have to be healed in order to be able to see myself as I truly am and forever, get rid of the need to convince somebody of anything. And the Courage Mastermind is a beautiful program that does just that. Helps you get to the core. Because nothing's going to change as long as you're walking around with that core lie. You're always going to process. And it's so deep you don't even remember. And it could have happened to you when you were young, something that happened in passing, something that happened that was like not a big deal. People weren't even thinking about it on the level that you took it as a kid, but you kind of took that and ran with it. Or as you've gone through life and you've experienced things, you've allowed those experiences to define who you are. Right? Sometimes you're struggling with unforgiveness for yourself. You cannot believe that God has called you to do this thing in this season because of how you behaved before, because of what you did before. So you are struggling to forgive yourself. Listen, we got to get some healing. Listen, healing is your responsibility. It's not your husband's responsibility, not your best friend. Healing is on you. So what are you doing to get the healing that you need? Because if you are blind, then it's a healing that you need. You need a healing for your soul, a healing for yourself. You need a healing for your spirit. You understand? Not something to be taken lightly. Just think. I feel like this. If you can think right now how many times somebody has said something or done something and you walked away from that conversation feeling like, oh, they don't see me. Even if they never said that to you, they didn't say, oh, I don't see you. You walked away from the conversation with your spouse, with your mom, with your best friend, with your cousin, with your girl circle, with your guy circle, whatever. You walked away from that feeling like, oh, they don't see me. Ask your question, are you able to clearly see yourself in that area? Or are you struggling with times of doubt? Are you struggling with thoughts of uncertainty? If you're feeling like a fraud, you have that imposter syndrome, there's something there. Let's get to the bottom of it. I talked about how the Courage Mastermind is the sponsor for this episode. It is it's a 12-week program that requires a lot of hard work. Sometimes the healing process can be painful because it requires us to go back to the place where we were first wounded and something stuck. We were first wounded. We didn't heal properly. And you have to dig deep into that. That's painful. It would be painful physically. It's painful spiritually and emotionally to do that. But it's required for healing. It's required if you're going to see yourself clearly. Because without it, we continue on the way we are, struggling with moments of confidence, struggling with moments of courage, questioning our own worth. It bleeds over into our relationships. As a result of feeling unsupported, we cut people off. As a result of feeling unappreciated, we end marriages, we put up walls. As a result of feeling unqualified, we don't say yes to the call on our life. We stay stuck in a rut. We live lives that are unfulfilled, lives that seem to go on without purpose. Now we're moving into grief, grieving the relationship because now we're about to get a divorce. Things don't stay the same. Things either change, right? Things get better or they get worse. And if you don't do something about it, they get worse. Things continue to get worse. I know that you don't want your marriage to end in divorce. I know you don't want to spend the rest of your days on this earth thinking about what you wish you could do, what you wish you were qualified to do, what you wish you were smart enough, talented enough, connected enough to do. First of all, Jesus is the plug. You don't need a greater connection than that. And I tell people all the time, I don't need to know nobody. I need to know Jesus because Jesus knows everybody and he's the plug. You're going to miss out on those things. You don't want to live the rest of your life unfulfilled, just making it day by day. You don't want to live out the rest of your marriage in a cold war, just tolerate. You don't want to feel the heaviness of that depression, right? You want to be healed. This is an opportunity for you to be healed. This is the program for that. So I encourage you to go to couragemelina.org and prayerfully consider enrolling. Enrollment is open now. You can get a discount. I don't know what the amount is because I do not remember, but the coupon code is DOC for Dose of Courage, right? So the coupon code is DOC. So you can put that in at checkout, whether you are doing a one-time payment or paying monthly. And that's just for my, Courage Crusaders. But listen, I'm going to get out of here. I hope that you realize that the person that needs the healing aren't the people in your life. It's not your spouse. It's not your mom. It's not your homegirl. It's you. If you're wasting any time trying to convince someone of something, if you are waiting for somebody to see you, it's because you don't see yourself. And that requires a healing. So I pray y'all take the time, the necessary steps, and do the work to be healed. This is your girl, Courage Molina, Chief Courage Crusader. And until next time, be strong and very courageous. Love y'all.